I also wanted to ask you, any sort of news and notes if you've been keeping up with anything happening on the AEW side of things. Of course, we know we're on a countdown to their big show in Australia, which I guess once upon a time was in a stadium and now it's in an arena. And I guess that's created a lot of discussion. And I think some fans, maybe once upon a time, hoped that this might be a pay per view, although I don't technically think AEW ever announced anything like that. I do think fans sort of jumped to the idea that, hey, this is going to be a premium live event. Now, they've loaded the card up. Maybe it's not as heavy as a pay per view, but they're making it feel like more than just a TV show. But it is going to be a Saturday night special. But I guess they're still calling it Collision. And I saw Dave Meltzer recently talk about this, and he said perhaps just calling it Collision hurt. Maybe he was insinuating that, much like you sort of grew to not love the idea of Thunder, and by grew, I mean hated it from the very beginning. Well, Dave is freestyling. Do you think just the brand name Collision has been damaged to the point where maybe fans in Australia aren't excited to see it because it's called Collision? That to me was like, wow, I never even considered that fans may have lost confidence in just the show name. Is that a real thing, Eric, already at this point, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think, look, whether AEW intentionally allowed people to believe that this was going to be a pay-per-view, and you can allow people to believe whatever they want to believe if you don't want to correct them, or if your marketing and your promotion is intentionally ambiguous and vague. It's easy to understand why people in Australia, fans, who reacted initially to the, oh my gosh, 50,000 seat, stadium show, I got to be a part of that. And they took the leap themselves. Well, this must be a pay-per-view, because who would just do a Collision, which is a C show for TBS or TNT, whoever has it, I don't even know, nor do I care, because it doesn't matter. It's easy to understand how fans allowed themselves to believe that this was going to be a big stadium pay-per-view show and they were going to be a part of something special, because that's the way it was projected and presented. And now you find out that, well, it's not going to be a pay-per-view. I know we never said it would be, but we didn't say it wouldn't be. And we understand you just assumed that it was because it's in a stadium and it's in Australia and blah, 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 blah. But to go from that to a smaller arena and now making it clear, which they should have done in the very beginning, because now people have a pissed off taste in their mouth, right? They're pissed off because they felt like they were deceived. They weren't. They deceived themselves. But, that's a little bait and switchy, to be honest. And Dave was one of the ones that, and rightfully so, I'm not criticizing him for this, but the minute there's any change in a card or a schedule, particularly if it's at the top, his go-to was always, false advertising, very misleading. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. But now that they've come out and said, okay, we're going to move to a smaller arena, it's not going to be a big stadium show. Sorry, folks, we overestimated our own popularity. So we're going to move to a smaller arena so it doesn't look like shit. Oh, and it's going to be called Collision because, well, it's a Saturday night TV show that nobody watches.
Well, no, hang on now. You're getting real negative. But I mean, they called this from the beginning Grand Slam Australia. And if you recall, when they first started using the name Grand Slam, it was because they were running Arthur Ashe. And that was just a quote unquote regular TV show where they would double up a taping. They would do a Dynamite and a Collision. But you got, 2 nights of Grand Slam, but it just meant, hey, it was a cool venue in Arthur Ashe, which is a tennis stadium. And I liked that they called it Grand Slam. So I kind of never assumed that it would be a pay-per-view, but there was speculation when they first announced this. Oh, that's after the first of the year. Might this be a max special? I mean, I don't think we're that far away from AEW pay-per-view being a thing of the past, and maybe they're all max specials. It feels like that's the way the industry's going. So I guess I'm not piling on AEW here. I was really shocked to hear that maybe Meltzer felt like the brand name of the show was damaged because, like, I know you weren't high on Thunder, but I think most rank and file, ticket buying, casual wrestling fans just saw Thunder as a quote unquote WCW show. No, it wasn't Nitro, but it was a WCW show. I get that Nitro would be the A, but just the idea that there was a brand name of a show that he felt like was second tier already with AEW. I don't know, that it feels like a weird thing to be disappointed in. I would be happy if I'm getting my first show in Australia and they are going to give me a good card. And I don't know. It feels like at times we look for things to be upset about. Like, well, we thought it was a pay-per-view, but no one said it was. And they've been running Grand Slams in America using that same name. Like, it feels weird to me, Eric.
Not to me. And I think, again, going back to Dave is always looking for new excuses, new reasons, new spin to avoid the reality that AEW as a brand is deteriorating right before our eyes. So it's Dave's go-to it's not AEW. It's not the fact that they didn't promote the show well. It's not the fact that they shouldn't have announced it in the first place. It was a bad decision to begin with. There's a lot of reasons why this thing should have never occurred in the first place. But Dave wants to assign causation to the name of the show versus the fact that the company and the brand fucked up. They just did. Whatever goodwill they had in Australia, some of it's going to be diminished because of just the bad taste that they've left in people's mouth because of changing the venues and whether it was fair or unfair, allowing people to convince themselves that this was going to be a pay-per-view. None of that has anything to do with the fact that AEW is struggling, and this is the result of it. I don't think the name of the show, I think we're trying too hard to justify disappointment. It is what it is. There's very weak television in Australia. We've talked about this before. One of the reasons that AEW was successful in the beginning and was able to put whatever it was, 15, 18, 20,000 people in Arthur Ashe, whatever it was. I remember when it happened, I was extremely ecstatic about it and posted all kinds of stuff on social media, putting it over and putting Tony over because it was really quite the accomplishment. It's a new company, a new brand, but with that new company and with that new brand is new anticipation, new hope. And at that time, 2019, there were a lot of people looking for an alternative to WWE wrestling fans, hardcore wrestling fans. Well, now they've got it, but it's not much of an alternative, and it's just kind of atrophying before our eyes.
Well, we're all going to be paying close attention to see what happens. I, for one, am looking forward to seeing AEW for the first time in Australia. You went to Australia with WCW. Did you consider that? And I know there's a rich history of wrestling in Australia. We mentioned earlier that you didn't really think of Dallas as a wrestling town. Do you think that Australia represents a big opportunity for wrestling as a whole, just as a genre?
There's certainly a market for it there, but Australia is kind of hard to get to unless there's going to be a local promoter or a promoter in Australia that's going to be able to build a promotion and have weekly television and stabilize over a course of a couple, 2 or 3 years. I don't see anybody other than WWE being able to drop into Australia once or twice a year and be successful doing it. WWE can for obvious reasons. They've been in the marketplace for a long time. They've got an established history there. People know what to expect. But other than WWE, I don't think we'll see TNA making its way to Australia anytime in the next 10 years or any other wrestling organization for that matter. It's number one, it's really expensive. Flying a crew and production and everything else to Australia is incredibly expensive. That fact alone makes it prohibitive for mid-size or small promoters to say, let's go over to Australia and see how that goes. Without television, without established weekly television, wrestling on any kind of regular basis is never going to work in any market.